Although Hitler's drive and strong will enabled his rise to power, no one expected his determination to turn into an erratic obsession with control and dominance, which eventually brought his country to ruin.
During World War I, Germany planned on invading France by establishing position in the neutral Belgium. On August 2, 1914, the German government sent an ultimatum to Belgium demanding a passage through the country. 2 days later, the Belgian government refused the demands and the German government declared war on Belgium and attacked the Belgian city Liège. The Belgian government abandoned the capital Brussels on August 17th and moved westward. The Germans implemented a policy of terror called Schrecklichkeit against Belgian civilians soon after the invasion, in which massacres, executions, hostage takings, and the burning of towns and villages took place. Offensive strategies of France and Germany had failed by November 1914, leaving most of Belgium under German occupation. The Russian Revolution took place in the context of heavy military setback during the First World War during 1917, which left much of the Russian army in a state of mutiny. In the chaos, the members of the Imperial Parliament, the Duma, assumed control of the country, forming the Russian provincial government. The Soviets, which were dominated by soldiers and the urban industrial working class, initially permitted the provincial government to rule. When the provincial government chose to continue fighting the war with Germany, the Bolsheviks and other socialist factions were able to exploit virtually universal disdain toward the war efforts as the justification to advance the revolution further. In the October Revolution, the Bolsheviks led an armed insurrection by workers and soldiers in Petrograd that successfully overthrew the provincial government, transferring all its authority to the Soviets. The Bolsheviks established a communist state and created the USSR.
Our third event is the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, and ended war between Germany and the Allied powers. This forced Germany to disarm, demilitarize, and deoccupy the Rhineland, as well as pay back reparation fees to other countries that were damaged in the war. Due to these large economic losses, Germany then suffered massive hyperinflation. As a result of the riots of this hyperinflation, the Weimar Republic was formed. It was based around a president or chancellor and a parliament, Reichstag, while the president was elected by popular vote to a 7-year term. Our fourth event is the rise of Hitler to becoming leader of the Nazis. The National Socialist Party initially existed as just a small military intelligence unit assigned to keep tabs on the German workers' parties. It was small and disorganized with no agenda. However, the members expressed the same ideas and values as Hitler, and he saw this as an opportunity to push his political agenda of anti-Semitism. In July of 1921, he became the chairman of the party, and after a brief jail spell of 8 months, in 1924, he re-established this Nazi party with the strategy of gaining the votes of northern farmers and white-collar voters. In 1932, Hitler ran for president and received 30% of the popular vote, but still lost to Paul von Hindenburg. And in 1934, finally, after von Hindenburg died, Hitler is then seen as successor due to his popularity.
Hitler's ideology of purifying Germany became a reality when he spread anti-Jewish propaganda and anti-Semitism. This process escalated into the mass murder of Jews, which would come to be known as the Holocaust, a campaign that Hitler forced upon his men. After he came to power in 1933, his first intentions were to drive them out of the German economy by using propaganda. But in 1939, ghettos were created to deport Polish Jews during the invasion of Poland. A killing routine was apparent when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, where police units targeted Jewish locals and used guns and mobile gas vans to wipe them out, killing 1 to 1.5 million. During this time, the final solution was announced, an ultimatum that would eliminate all the Jews. Death camps were created where deported Jews would be gassed upon arrival, and concentration camps would force labor upon them, like the Auschwitz concentration camp. Known as a tragedy to mankind, Nazi Germany ended up wiping out 2/3 of the European Jewish population. On September 1st, Germany invaded Poland on the basis that they were taking defensive action against them, when really their ultimate goal was to take over their land and resources for living space. The invasion will also be known as the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, for its powerful military that caught Poland by surprise. Britain and France did not believe Germany's claims and declared war on September 3rd, with Britain dropping bombs on Germany. Poland still ended up in Germany's hands, as Britain and France did not do much in order to support their allying country. The Soviet Union was unable to come to Poland's aid because of the non-aggression pact signed with Germany in August, and thus began World War II.
The fall of France, also known as the Battle of France, was the German invasion and destruction of France in 1940. After Germany had conquered all of the lowland countries surrounding France, such as Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, the French were next on their list. Germany was able to push back French and British forces to the sea in order to cut off all Allied units, but luckily the British were able to evacuate at locations like Dunkirk, while 60 French divisions remained to form a resistance. The French were determined to hold their ground, though they were unfortunately able to overcome Germany's superior air forces and mobility. German tanks struck deep into the Maginot Line and practically pushed the remaining French forces to the border of their land. With chaos rising in the French government, the French army slowly fell apart and there was nothing else left to do other than surrender and accept the Germans' armistice. Unopposed, the Germans successfully took Paris on June 14, 1940. Also known as the first major battle solely fought by air forces, the Battle of Britain was a military campaign in which Britain's Royal Air Force defended the UK by fighting off the German Air Force. After many large-scale attacks, the battle was estimated to last around 4 months. There was also a period of time when Germans commenced their attacks in the nighttime, which was known as the Blitz. Germany's initial goal was to force Britain to agree to a negotiated peace settlement, but the objective slowly evolved into more violent tactics when the British did not comply. The desperate Germans targeted shipping convoys, ports, and airfields in an attempt to obtain air dominance, but were unsuccessful, and unfortunately resorted to terror bombings on places of political significance and even civilians. Germany quickly retreated after their failed attempts, since Hitler knew they were no match for the Royal Navy, which controlled the English Channel at the time. Again, Hitler attacked with the same strategies, but was unsuccessful in achieving his goals.
Following the Battle of Britain, Operation Barbarossa occurred after Germany and the Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression treaty in 1939. In 1940, Hitler ordered German military to bring the Soviet population and its economic potential under his control. On the 22nd of June 1941, 3.5 million German and Axis troops attacked the frontier with the support of 2,700 aircrafts. The Soviets, who had gathered large forces, had not believed they'd attack so soon. Even with 5 million men and 23,000 tanks, they were unprepared when the Germans struck. The Germans at first were rapidly pushing towards their goal of taking over Minsk, Smolensk, and Moscow, but mistakenly assumed that the campaign would be a short one after the Soviets suffered this massive initial defeats. Despite serious losses inflicted on the Red Army, the mission to destroy Soviet fighting power and force their surrender was not achieved. A year after Operation Barbarossa, in 1942, the Battle of Stalingrad began, and was the largest confrontation of the war in which Germany fought the Soviet Union for control of the city of Stalingrad. By the end of the battle, as German armies were starved, the Soviets advanced into Stalingrad and split up the German army. When all the airfields used to resupply those troops were captured and most of them wounded, the Germans surrendered on the 2nd of February 1943, and 91,000 troops became prisoners. The surrender at Stalingrad became identified as a turning point for the Eastern Front. Germany's defeat dealt a devastating blow to German morale and shattered their reputation for invincibility. With Great Britain and the United States, the Soviet Union ultimately defeated the Germans in May 1945.
In conclusion, if Hitler's obsession with world dominance was checked by another governmental power, our world today could have looked far different than we know it. His monumental blunder by attacking Germany's allies and not punishing vulnerable Allied troops ultimately led to the loss of tactical power in the war. The downfall of the Nazis after the loss at Stalingrad was swift and fast, as Allied troops began to push in from Western Europe shortly after, most famously on the beaches of Normandy. This crushed the Nazi regime and liberated the rest of Europe from the vice of German dictatorship.